She never thought life would bring her here, standing barefoot on marble floors in a palace that looked like something out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The desert heat outside was unforgiving, but inside, everything was cold and quiet. Too quiet. Alina could still feel her heart pounding in her chest as she waited, dressed in a silky robe that wasn't hers, in a room that didn't belong to her. Just 3 months ago, she was cleaning toilets in a hotel in Spain, barely making enough to send money back home to her sick mother in Romania. She was quiet, invisible, the kind of girl no one looked at twice. But one rich guest changed everything. His eyes were dark like midnight, his smile charming but dangerous. He saw her when no one else did. He was Prince Rami, the second son of an oil empire in the Middle East. He didn't need to work. He didn't need to care. But for some reason, he watched her every time he passed the hotel corridor. At first, she thought she was being paranoid. Then came the notes, then the roses, then the offer. $5 million, one night, no one has to know. You walk away a millionaire. She laughed at first, thought it was a joke. But he wasn't joking. He even brought a lawyer and a contract, written in her native language. Everything was spelled out clearly. One night with him. No pressure, no violence, full consent. She could say no. But if she said yes, her mother's surgery would be paid for. Her family would never have to worry again. $5 million. Cash. In a Swiss account. She didn't sleep that night. Alina wasn't the kind of girl to sell herself. She wasn't even the kind of girl to date. She had never kissed a man, let alone been touched by one. Her virginity was something she held like a secret, not for religious reasons, not even for pride. Just because. She was waiting for someone who would truly see her, someone who didn't see her as a poor maid or a helpless girl. But life doesn't always give you choices. Sometimes it gives you a price tag. She signed the contract. Now, here she was. The clock ticked past midnight. Prince Rami hadn't come yet. She could still walk out, but the money was already sitting in the account. She had checked it twice. It was real. Every digit, every dollar, just waiting for her to fulfill the other side of the deal. The door finally opened, and he walked in, tall, dressed in traditional white robes, his beard trimmed, his scent a mix of oud and danger. He didn't smile, didn't rush, just closed the door and stood there looking at her. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, trying to sound brave, but her voice cracked halfway. "I knew you would," he replied. His voice was deep, calm. Hand held a strange gentleness. He didn't look at her like meat. He didn't move like a predator. It was almost worse. He looked at her like he already owned her. Like he knew she had made peace with her choice and hated herself for it. "You can still say no," he said suddenly. "I'll leave the money. You walk away free." She blinked, confused. "Why would you—" He didn't answer. Just sat down on the couch across from her and stared. For a moment they just sat in silence, the air thick with heat and tension, and something neither of them could name. "Why me?" she whispered. "You remind me of something I lost," he said. "Long ago." She didn't ask more. She didn't want to know. Maybe that was the price of $5 million. Not just her body, but also her silence. She stood up slowly and walked to him, each step heavy with guilt, confusion, and a strange pull she didn't understand. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about lust. It was something else, something darker, something sadder. And when she reached him, he stood too, and they looked at each other like two people drowning in their own choices. The first thing she noticed was how cold his hands were. Not icy, not dead, just cold. Like he didn't carry heat anymore. Like the warmth had been taken from him a long time ago. Maybe by a woman, maybe by a war. His fingers brushed her jaw gently, and for a second she thought he might kiss her. He didn't. Instead, he stepped back, motioned to the bed with a single glance, and said nothing. She stood there, frozen, unsure what to do. Every part of her screamed to run, but her feet stayed planted, her pride swallowed, her choice already made. Alina walked to the edge of the bed and sat down, clutching the silk robe tight around her. Her heart raced like it was trying to escape her chest. She couldn't believe she was doing this. $5 million, that was what her purity was worth now. She wasn't a romantic, but this still felt like dying slowly. Rami moved toward her, but not like a man on fire. He moved with control, like someone who had done this before, like someone who knew the rules of this unspoken game. He didn't rip the robe, he didn't rush. He knelt in front of her and looked up into her eyes, like he wanted permission, not dominance. "You've never done this before," he said softly, not asking, just stating it. She nodded, eyes stinging with shame she didn't even understand. "I know," he said. "That's why I offered the money." Her head tilted slightly, confused. "So you wanted someone untouched?" "No," he replied, voice calm. "I wanted someone real." That hit her like a slap she didn't expect. She wasn't sure if it was manipulation or truth, but it stuck. In a world full of fake smiles and gold diggers, maybe being real was rare. Or maybe he just wanted to feel like he still had power over something pure. Still kneeling, he pulled her feet into his lap. His hands were steady now, massaging her ankles like he was preparing her, easing her into something awful but dressed up in comfort. She didn't know if it was kindness or cruelty. Maybe both. "You're not what I expected," she whispered. "And you're exactly what I needed," he replied. There was something broken in his words, not the way he said them, but the weight behind them. It wasn't lust he was feeding. It wasn't pleasure. It was emptiness. This wasn't about her. This was about something he was trying to fill inside himself. And he had chosen her to fill it, like a hole that swallowed innocence for survival. He leaned forward and kissed her knee. Just that, nothing more. She flinched anyway. "You don't have to be scared," he said, almost with sadness. "I won't hurt you." She believed him. Somehow she did. But that didn't make it easier. It just made it more complicated. The robe slid from her shoulder, slowly, almost respectfully, and when it did, he didn't stare like a hungry man. He looked haunted. "You're too good for this," he said quietly, eyes never leaving hers, "but I'm not." The words hit harder than anything else. That night wasn't rough, it wasn't violent, it wasn't passionate either. It was quiet, slow, full of awkward silences and broken breaths. He asked before touching. He waited for her nods. He moved like a man who knew he didn't deserve softness, but was still trying to borrow it just for a moment. When it was done, she didn't cry. She thought she would, but she didn't. She lay there staring at the golden chandelier above, them wondering if she had lost something she could never get back. Not her virginity, but her idea of who she was. He stayed beside her, but they didn't touch, didn't speak, just existed in the heavy silence of a palace that felt more like a prison now. And somewhere in that silence, Alina realized this wasn't going to be just one night. The sun rose slow and merciless, cutting through the silk curtains like a blade. Alina didn't sleep. She lay on her side, still under the same sheets, staring at the wall with swollen, dry eyes. Prince Rami was already gone. She heard him leave just before dawn. No words, no goodbye. Not even the sound of the door closing felt real. It was like he vanished with the night. The silence left behind was louder than anything she'd ever known. She pulled the robe back over her shoulders, even though her body still remembered his touch. Not rough, not cold, but careful, like he had been handling something fragile. That somehow made it worse. She wanted to feel hate, anger, regret. But all she felt was emptiness. It was like someone reached inside and pulled something out of her without asking. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked older, darker, as if the girl who had cleaned hotel rooms just yesterday had evaporated. In her place stood a woman who had sold something priceless and still didn't know how to live with it. A knock came at the door. She didn't answer. She wasn't sure she could. It opened anyway, quiet, respectful. A maid entered, dressed in all black, head lowered. "The prince asked me to bring you clothes," she said in a soft accent, "and breakfast if you wish." Alina just nodded. She couldn't find her voice. The maid walked over, placed a gold tray on the table, and laid a folded set of clothes on the bed. Designer, soft, clearly hand-picked. "There's a car waiting outside," the maid added. "You're free to leave whenever you wish." "The account has been updated." Alina blinked. "He's not going to see me." The maid hesitated. "He doesn't do goodbyes." Of course he didn't. Alina waited until the woman left before she opened the laptop on the table. Her hands trembled as she logged in. The Swiss account showed the full amount, $5,000. Clean, real, untouched. Her mother's surgery, her sister's education, her family's escape from poverty. It was all possible now. She had done it. She had saved them. So why did it? Feel like she had broken herself to do it? She changed into the clothes he left, a cream-colored blouse and soft jeans that somehow fit her perfectly, as if he had measured her without touching her. The prince had power like that, power that didn't need words, power that watched, studied, calculated. She stepped out of the room, her footsteps echoing through the endless hallways of marble and gold. Guards didn't look at her, servants didn't speak. It was like she didn't exist, like this was all part of something everyone else had already seen before, just another girl in a long list of secrets. But as she walked toward the car, a guard stepped forward and handed her a phone. "From the prince," he said. She took it without a word, climbed into the luxury car, and didn't look back. She told herself she was free now. The deal was over, she was going home. But the phone burned in her hand the entire ride. It wasn't until she reached the airport that she finally turned it on. One message, no name, just a number and a text. "You're not just a memory to me. If you ever need anything at all, use this." She stared at the words, unsure if she wanted to throw the phone out the window or clutch it to her chest. Why would he say that? Why offer more when he'd already taken everything? She flew back to Romania in silence, carrying two things, $5 million and a heart that didn't know what to feel anymore. Her mother cried when she saw her, weak from the hospital bed, but alive. Her sister hugged her like she hadn't changed, like she was still the same Alina. But she wasn't. At night, when everything was quiet again, she'd stare at that phone. She told herself she hated him, told herself he was just a man who bought a piece of her soul. But part of her wasn't sure, because in those hours, when the world was sleeping and her mind wouldn't shut off, she found herself wondering, why did it feel like something between them wasn't finished? 3 weeks passed, long, slow, heavy weeks. Alina settled back into life in Bucharest like a ghost, slipping into someone else's body. Her mother was recovering beautifully after the surgery, her cheeks fuller, her color coming back. Her little sister, Irina, didn't have to skip school anymore to help with bills. The house was warm for the first time in years, and their fridge was full, bursting with food they used to only dream about. But Alina, she didn't feel full. She didn't feel anything at all. She donated some of the money quietly to families she knew were struggling. No one asked where it came from. Maybe they thought she hit the lottery, maybe they didn't care. The neighborhood whispered, but no one said it out loud, not to her face at least. She thought the nightmares would fade, but they didn't. Some nights she woke up in a cold sweat, Rami's scent still in her nose, that thick, intoxicating blend of oud and smoke. Sometimes she could still feel his hands, still hear his voice. Not from the night they spent together, but from the strange way he had looked at her. Like he had known this wouldn't be the end. And the phone. God, that phone. She kept it hidden under her mattress, charging it in secret, checking it every day, even though it never buzzed again. No new messages. Nothing. Just that one sentence, burned into the screen like a scar. "You're not just a memory to me." She told herself it was just guilt talking, that maybe he said it to all the girls. Maybe he just wanted to keep her hanging, like a puppet waiting for his next command. But deep down she knew it didn't feel like that. She still hadn't told anyone the truth. Not her mother, not Irina, not even her own reflection. The weight of what she'd done stayed locked in her chest, like a secret she was afraid might rot her from the inside out. Then, one afternoon, while shopping for groceries, the phone rang. She froze in the aisle. Her hands were trembling so hard she almost dropped the eggs. She stepped into a corner, heart thudding against her ribs, and answered without saying a word. Silence. Then that voice, deep, velvet smooth, familiar. "Did you think I wouldn't call?" Her throat dried up. Why now?" "I waited," he said. "You needed time." "To do what? Heal?" she whispered bitterly. Forget what I sold you." "No," he said calmly. "To realize you didn't lose yourself. You found something you don't understand yet." She wanted to scream at him, tell him he didn't know anything about her, that he bought her for a night, and thought it meant he owned her thoughts. Too, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, her legs gave way and she slid down to sit on the cold tile floor, hiding her face in her hands. "I shouldn't have taken it," he said. "I thought I was doing something clean, something transactional. But it wasn't, not with you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Then why did you do it?" "I thought I could forget someone by buying a piece of someone else," he said quietly. "But I didn't forget. And now, I can't forget you either." It hit her in the chest like a punch. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he added. I want to see you again." She laughed bitterly through the tears. "What? For another 5 million? "No," he said, "for nothing. No contracts, no expectations, just a flight, my city, you, me, a chance to talk like people, not like deals." Silence stretched on her end. "I won't call again," he said. "If you don't come, that's it. You live your life, I'll disappear." Then the line went dead. Alina sat there for a long time, people walking past, her like she was invisible again. Only this time she didn't care. She had a choice now to leave it all behind, or to face the man who bought her body but somehow touched something much deeper, and for reasons she still didn't understand. She booked a flight the next morning. The plane ride felt longer than it should have, not because of the hours, but because of the storm in her chest. Alina had barely eaten, barely spoken. Her fingers tapped against her jeans non-stop, and she stared out the window like the sky held answers she hadn't found on Earth. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a confrontation, a twisted kind of homecoming to a man who once undressed her soul with money. And yet, some foolish part of her heart wanted to see him again, to understand what really happened that night and why it never stopped echoing inside her. When she landed, a driver was already waiting, suited, silent, holding a sign that simply read, "A. Ballon." No paparazzi, no crowd, just a black SUV and a long road ahead. The driver didn't say a word as they passed glittering skyscrapers and markets full of gold and spices. The city was loud, alive, humming with energy, but in her chest silence still reigned. When they reached the estate, not the palace from before, but something more personal, more modern, she hesitated before stepping out. And then she saw him. Prince Rami stood at the entrance, dressed in black this time. No robe, no guards, just him, tall, unreadable, and somehow still able to make her stomach tighten with one look. She stepped forward slowly, unsure if she was walking into something dangerous or something healing. "You came," he said, voice low, almost surprised. "I don't know why," she admitted. He nodded once. "Then let's find out." Inside, the place was nothing like the golden prison she remembered. It was simple, minimal. Clean wood, soft lights, glass walls showing the desert stretching far beyond. No servants in sight, no one watching, just her and him. He poured tea, sat down, waited. Not once did he reach for her, not even with his eyes. Finally, she broke the silence. "What do you want from me now?" "Nothing," he said. "I just want to tell you who I was before I met you." Alina blinked, confused, but something about his tone made her lean in. "I was engaged once," he began, staring at the tea in his cup. "Not for love, for politics. A match arranged since childhood. She was beautiful, clever, and I think she hated me." "What happened?" Alina asked quietly. "She died," he said. "Car crash. But the rumor was she was running from me." Her breath caught. "I never touched her," he said firmly, "but she feared being caged by this life. And maybe I reminded her of the chains." Alina sat, frozen, unsure what to say. "After that I changed," he said. "Stopped caring, stopped feeling. I became the prince everyone expected. Cold, sharp, calculating. And when I saw you in that hotel, I didn't see a maid. I saw someone free. Real. Not yet broken. "You broke me anyway," she whispered. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I know. That's why I called. Not to fix it. Just to say, I'm sorry. Truly." Tears burned behind her eyes, not because he apologized, but because she finally believed him. He looked up then, eyes darker than she remembered. "I've never wanted anyone like I want you, and not for your body, for your strength, your truth. You reminded me I could feel again." Alina stood, heart pounding. "So what now? You want me to stay? To play lover and forget the past?" "No," he said, standing too. "I want you to choose. Stay if you want. Leave if you don't. But if you do stay, it's not for money. It's not for guilt. It's because something between us still matters." The silence between them was deafening, and then she did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward. Not into his arms, not into his bed, but beside him. "I don't forgive you," she said, "not yet." "I don't expect you to," he replied. "But I want to see who you really are," she said, "without the money, without the prince." He nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. "Then stay," he whispered, "and find out." The next few days unfolded slowly, like the peeling of something fragile. Not a romance, not yet, but a strange, raw kind of honesty. There were no private chefs or diamond necklaces, no lavish gifts trying to win her over. Just quiet mornings, honest conversations and long walks under the desert stars. Prince Rami, or just Rami as he asked her to call him now, showed her pieces of himself no one else had seen. His art room, filled with half-finished canvases of faceless women. His mother's old garden, dying from neglect but still alive in scent. His study, where books in 3 languages were worn and dog-eared from years of use. "This is who I was," he said one evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the dunes. "Before duty crushed it out of me." Alina listened, not speaking much. She wasn't ready to give herself yet, not emotionally, not physically. But she was watching, weighing his truths against the man she remembered from that night. And somewhere between the silence and the shared tea, something started to shift. One night she wandered into his painting room again. It was nearly midnight. The lights were dim. He was standing in front of a canvas, brush in hand, sleeves rolled up, shirt smeared with paint. He didn't hear her enter. On the easel was a portrait, unfinished, of course, but it was her. Not the version of her from the night they spent together. No, this was the real her, hair messy, eyes fierce, face tired but brave. He had painted her with reverence and pain. "You never finished it," she said softly. He turned slowly. "Because I still don't know how it ends." Her heart thudded hard at that. "I see you every day in my head," he added, putting the brush down. "Not like that night, like this. Like now, strong, guarded, unforgiving." "I'm not unforgiving," she said. I don't want to be someone you bought." "You never were," he said. "You were someone I reached for when I was drowning, and I hate that." "I made you my lifeline." She looked down. "So what do you want from me now, Rami?" "I want to earn your presence," he said. "Not your body, not your loyalty. Just you." It was the first time in years she felt tears rise without pain behind them. This man, once so cold, now looked like he would break just to see her stay. And still she didn't answer. She just walked up to the painting, picked up a second brush, and dipped it into the color. "Then let's finish this together." They painted in silence. Hours passed, paint splattered, colors blended, lines turned into shapes. And somewhere in the process, she felt the wall inside her begin to crack. Not collapse, just soften. Later that night, she fell asleep on the couch in the art room, wrapped in an old blanket. When she woke, the sun was rising, and Rami was asleep beside her, seated on the floor, head leaned against the sofa, not touching her, just near her, guarding her. That morning she made breakfast, small, simple, scrambled eggs and toast. He walked into the kitchen with sleepy eyes and no guards, and for once he looked like just a man. "You cooked?" he said, amused. "I figured you've had enough gold-plated steaks in your life," she replied dryly. He smiled, not the prince's smile, the man's. And that's when she realized maybe the boy inside him never died. Maybe he was just buried beneath expectations and mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to dig him out. That morning felt different. It wasn't love, not yet, but it wasn't guilt either. There was a softness now, a kind of emotional truce between two people who had both done things they weren't proud of. They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was quiet in the way that only trust can be quiet. Rami looked less like royalty and more like a man who had finally laid down his armor. His robe was wrinkled, hair a little messy, eyes heavy with something he hadn't shown her before: peace. Alina didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Peace was dangerous. It made her heart want things again. It made her hope. After breakfast, she stood at the sink, washing dishes with sleeves rolled up. He came up behind her but didn't touch, just stood close enough for her to feel him. "You don't have to do that," he murmured. "I know," she replied, "but I want to feel useful. Not just looked at." He nodded, stepping away. "You've always been more than something to look at, Alina." She dried her hands and turned to him. "Then why did you treat me like a price?" That question had been waiting in her throat for weeks, and now that it was out, it landed in the room like a weight. Rami didn't flinch, didn't get defensive. He just sat down and folded his hands. "Because I thought that's all I deserved," he said simply. "I had nothing in me that deserved love or kindness. I thought if I paid for it, at least no one could call it a lie." She stared at him. "You weren't punishing me. You were punishing yourself." He looked up, eyes filled with something almost like shame. "I chose you because I saw the light in you, and I hated myself for needing it." Her chest tightened. "I hated you for taking it." They both sat in that truth for a while. That afternoon, he took her to the desert. No guards, no security. Just a camel, 2 bottles of water, and miles of golden sand stretching forever. The sun was merciless, but the wind cooled her cheeks as they rode in silence. "Why bring me here?" she asked finally, shading her eyes with her hand. "Because this is where I go when I want to disappear," he said. "I thought maybe you wanted to disappear too." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes." They stopped at a small cliff overlooking the dunes, the horizon glowing with orange and fire. He spread out a woven blanket and they sat, watching the sky melt into night. "I never asked," he said quietly. "What did you see in me that night?" She looked at him, the sand catching in his beard, his eyes soft in the fading light. "I saw power," she said honestly. "Danger, mystery, everything a girl like me isn't supposed to touch. But I also saw sadness, a kind of loneliness that money couldn't hide." "And that's why you said yes?" he asked. She shook her head. "I said yes for my mother, but I stayed because of that sadness." He turned to her then, eyes wide with something raw. "Do you think you could stay again?" The wind blew between them like a question too big for words. Alina didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand, not for lust, not for comfort, but for grounding, for truth. "If I stay," she said, "it has to be real. No games, no power, no buying pieces of each other." He nodded slowly, fingers tightening gently around hers. "Then stay." She leaned her head on his shoulder as the stars came out one by one, scattering like diamonds across the dark velvet sky. And for the first time since that night, that dark, twisted, expensive night, Alina felt like her heart had space to breathe again. Not healed, but healing. Time passed differently in the desert. Days felt slow, like honey sliding down glass. Nights stretched longer, quieter, heavy with thoughts, light with words. Alina had stayed, not because she forgave him, not because everything suddenly made sense, but because she wanted to be there. And that alone made all the difference. She began carving out a life in his world, not as a guest, not as a bought, secret, but as a woman trying to live beside a man who had once broken her. Rami, to his credit, never pushed. He didn't demand affection. He didn't expect her to fall into his bed or his arms. He gave her time, and with that time, something real began to grow. They'd eat together every morning, read in silence, by the balcony argue sometimes, small sharp disagreements that felt almost normal. She found herself teasing him without fear, even laughing with him. Once, she threw a pillow at his head when he made a sarcastic remark about her cooking, and he just laughed and said, "I deserve that." He did. He knew it. And she never let him forget it. But one night everything shifted. They were sitting on the roof, looking at the stars again. The same stars that had witnessed the worst and best of them. Alina pulled her knees to her chest and said something she hadn't dared to before. "I don't feel dirty anymore." Rami turned his head toward her gently, carefully. "I never saw you that way." She gave a half smile. "I know, but I did." He didn't interrupt. He knew better now. Knew when to speak and when to simply listen. "I hated myself for a long time. For what I did. For the money. For even considering it. But I don't anymore. Because I know who I am now." "Who are you?" he asked softly. "Someone who made a choice," she said, "and someone who learned how to live with it. Not because of the money, not because of you, but because I didn't let it destroy me." He looked at her with something close to awe. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." "No," she said. "I just stopped expecting the world to treat me gently." He reached over then, slowly, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can I love you?" he whispered. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned into him, rested her head on his chest, listened to his heartbeat. Slow, steady, unguarded. "You can try," she murmured. And that night, for the first time, they shared a bed, not as a prince and a maid, not as a man and his purchased fantasy, but as two flawed people finding something like redemption in each other's arms. There was no contract, no silence, no fear, just warmth, just breathing, just them. Months passed. Alina stayed in his country, but not in his shadow. She opened a small gallery in the city, displaying local artists who had no platform. She painted again, something she hadn't done since she was a girl, and it turned out her pain made beautiful things. Rami supported her without controlling her. He attended her gallery opening like a proud lover, not a prince. And people noticed. They whispered. Some judged, but they didn't matter. They were writing their own story now. A story that began with a price, a body, and a broken promise, but somehow, against all odds, it ended with something fragile, something rare, something like love.